Let's transition, all right, to the offensive line. And we knew there were questions coming in, Brent. We knew that Tennessee had to find a left guard. We knew that Tennessee had to find a right tackle. So it's not like, not having solidified 5 up there is a surprise right now, because it's not. But Josh Heupel did say in Monday's press conference, hey, they're going to be a bit of a rotation there at some of those positions. Continuity-wise, you never really want that on the offensive line, but it is something that they've done in years past, and they did it at left tackle last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge shock to me or a surprise to me that they're not settled there. I thought that it would be one of those things that would settle itself out through the first few weeks of the season. And again, I think it's important to note that Glenn Ellerbe has a history of intentionally having a rotation on the offensive line, which is a bit of the outside the box for what you kind of hear through the years, right, Rob? I mean, it was all about continuity. You got to get your 5 so they're in step together, and they know what the other one's doing before it happens, and everybody's comfortable beside each other. You go back to the UCF days with Glenn Ellerbe. I mean, they played routinely 6, 7 offensive linemen by design. And hey, second quarter, almost like the running back getting the third series of the game or whatever. There were times that they would go with a different guard in the second quarter, not because the matchup was bad, just because they were in a rotation there. So I don't think it's a huge concern that they're going to rotate, because it's not a surprise to me. The question is who ascends and becomes, who is a part of that rotation? Because right now you got 3 guys at right tackle, you got like 4 bodies at left guard. Kind of what does it look like when they whittle it down to 6 or 7, and when did they get there?
These coaches have forgotten more football than I'll ever know. But also, and again, I know they've done this in the past, and I know they did this last year at left tackle with the number 1 offense in the country. But when you talk about rotation on the offensive line, that just doesn't sit right, does it? I mean, from a football standpoint, that's just something that it's unique, and it's not really easy to hear, I guess.
Well, no, I mean, I think ultimately you'd love to have the continuity, but I don't think Tennessee, has that luxury right now. And, I think that left guard spot is going to be a revolving door until they kind of figure it out. Who I'm not going to say that they're going to be Theo Jackson, but who is that Theo Jackson type player that, is kind of overlooked, and then all of a sudden, boom, he has a really nice senior year. I mean, is that Ollie Lane shifting back to left guard once Cooper gets healthy? Is that Jackson Lampley? I think they'll start Andre Carrick, because I think for whatever reason that's kind of the direction they're going to go. I'm not so sure that that's where it ends up, but I think that there's multiple options there. And again, I think somebody has to grab the bull by the horns and lock down that spot if Tennessee is going to have the season they hope to have.
And it's almost like the guard is the conversation, Rob, right? Because it is just such an unknown. Whereas, sure, there's 2 or 3 guys repping at right tackle right now, but we've seen those guys play, and they did this all last year. Now they got to flip over and do it on the other side, which is no easy task. But it's almost like, okay, we have faith that right tackle spot's going to be all right, because they know this offense. It's just it's such an unknown at guard right now. And I do think that something will help with that, Rob, is when obviously Cooper Mays comes back, Ollie Lane can shift, and that rotation should get a little smaller.
Yeah, I mean, so much depends on Cooper's health, and when can you get Ollie Lane back there? And and I think Ollie's a guy that people should have confidence in. I'm not saying he's an all SEC performer, but he's played a lot of football in this league, has bounced around, has been here a long time. But Addison Nichols, unknown. Andre Carrick, has played a little bit at Texas, but unknown. And it's just ironic, because going back to June or even July, certainly when we started really talking previewing fall camp, I know Brent, everybody was on it, but Brent was on the train, of Cooper Mays is can't get hurt, and here we are, dealing with that. And if he comes back in speedy fashion, it could actually be the kind of thing that is a benefit for you down the road. No, I'm not saying he's got to get back quick. I mean, you don't want his first game back at Florida, but having gone through all this in fall camp and had to juggle so much stuff could actually be something that works in their favor 6, 7, 8 games into the season.
In a perfect world, however, this would have been Addison Nichols or Vyson Lang runs with this. They become the starter until Cooper gets back, and then the guy who's the heir apparent has reps leading into whenever that person ascends to being the starting center once Cooper's playing career is done. That looks like it's not going to be the case. It's going to be a senior on the last year of his eligibility with Ollie Lane. So again, like I think a little bit of a missed opportunity there with Cooper going down, but I guess something they'll have to manage.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think it's a situation. It's probably unfair to ask for Vice and Lang to be ready right now.
It is 100%. That's not fair to him. No.
But I think if you can get in a game, no offense to the Governors of Austin P, but if you can get into that game and you get Vice and Lang, some reps at center, what a great luxury that would be there. Maybe Addison Nichols is not a center. Maybe that's just not his position. I don't know that. Okay,
I'm just force that to him. Like he had never played that till he got here.
Right, yeah. And maybe that's just not his. Maybe that's not his thing. So I don't know. I mean, maybe he's better suited at guard. We'll have to see as time goes. But obviously, when you have the injury to Cooper Mays, you're not sure exactly when he's going to be back. You got to put the guy out there that can make your offense go the best that it can at the center position. And clearly they believe that is Ollie Lane at this point. And I mean, Addison Nichols had all the spring, he had all summer to work there. Opportunity in the fall camp, maybe didn't take advantage of it the way he needed to. But maybe center's not his spot. We'll just have to see as time goes on. I just think that we're going to see them rotate some guys now. It's easy to do the first couple of games, right? Because you're unsettled for game one. So you're sort of doing it out of necessity in game one. Game two, you're going to do it out of the opportunity. The question is going to be when you get into a night game in Gainesville, Florida, and it gets loud, are you really going to play 7 offensive linemen? Or are you going to go in there and going, all right, we're pretty comfortable with here's our best 5 right now. We're going to play these 5. I don't know. I mean, we'll see how the next few weeks plays out.
That missed opportunity about the backup center, Austin. I mean, the same could be said for last year. The same could be said for 2021. I mean, Tennessee's not had a backup center since Cooper Mays was the backup in 2020.
You also knew that the last 2 years, Jerome Carvin was sitting there at left guard and, could slide over and had years of eligibility left. This is different because, Ollie, again, is in the last year of eligibility. And so thus, again, it's fine. I mean, I don't think it hurts or helps or whatever. Like I think, like I said, though, in a perfect world, one of your younger guys, and Hubs brings up a good point. Austin P, you get up in that game, the guy that needs to go in as a younger guy who, needs the reps just in case, they need to be able to be getting in there at some point this year.
You flip over to the defense side of the football. You look at that secondary. Josh Heupel also mentioned on Monday's press conference that Tennessee's going to play a whole lot of guys in the back end. And boy, does that sound good, right? Tennessee played a whole lot of cornerbacks last year. They had to. Tennessee didn't play a whole lot of safeties. Brent Hubbs, can Tennessee have a true rotation back there with the quality of options that they have for those 5 spots in the defensive secondary?
I think it's easy to say they're going to have a rotation at corner because I think you've got a bunch of guys who have some ability. I think Brandon Turnage can play in this league. Kamal Haddon, Danico Slaughter, Gabe Judy Lawley has played in this league. Then you got those young guys we haven't even talked about, plus Warren Burrell. So you've got a lot of bodies there. And I think you could see some rotation there. I've got to see it to believe it at the safety spot, right? I mean, I think Wesley Walker's locked in. It appears that Jalen McCullough's completely locked in. Now, you talk about surprises in camp, your first question out of the gate. Andre Turrentine is a guy who was left for dead pretty much by a lot of people in spring practice. I mean, his mind wasn't where it needed to be. His focus wasn't where it needed to be. And it didn't seem like he was going anywhere. Wesley Walker's hurt much of fall camp, Austin. Opportunity abound. There's a guy who's taken advantage of his opportunity. Does that mean he starts? No, I don't think he starts. But he is a guy who has created some confidence not only for himself, but with the coaches in him that in case he's called upon or they want to rotate, then maybe there's some comfort level with Andre Turrentine. He's taken full advantage of this fall camp, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at Andre, and again, I think, you start, just kind of, narrowing the focus a little bit, especially as an older guy. It's one thing to kind of have some, things you get distracted by as a freshman or sophomore. But now that you're 3rd and 4th year into college, the earth's getting big in the window, to quote the great Apollo 13. But I think it is for some of these older guys. Like, it's time to focus. Hey, do I want something beyond college football? And if I do, then I better, get it together and get honed in and focused on what we're trying to do and get on the field and put some tape out there for NFL teams.
What's going on over there at the Price household? Max is furious. Somebody walking by?
The thing, Eric, to answer your question, though, again, it's one thing to talk about playing a bunch of guys, and Rob, you know this. I mean, it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to do it, and it'll be easy to do. I think easier to do in those first couple of games, but the proof will be in the pudding when you start to get into conference play. How much do you fall back and just go with 5, or do you really rotate a bunch of guys back there? I'll be curious to see that, because it's one thing to say it; it's another thing to do it.
And again, and Josh Heupel made note, some of these guys who have been out a little bit, returning to practice, getting back in the fold, guys like Wesley Walker, Tamari McDonald, they were back in full pads and going through practice last week. But you can also have some options to where maybe not right now because you're focused on getting ready for the opener, but Tamari McDonald's a safety. He's a star, but he's also a safety. Potentially you could slot him back there if Warren Burrell is a guy that you can count on that has taken also advantage of this fall camp and these opportunities to get some playing time. That could be another option as well. So that might not be an option, Rob, for game number 1 of the season, but moving forward, week 5, week 6, potentially all this cross training could benefit Tennessee in the secondary.
Yeah, you just have a bunch of guys that have played a bunch of football, and we've talked about it. You don't have anybody that you can point to and say, man, that guy's he's a lock, top 3-round draft pick, or he's a first team All-SEC player. But man, they've got I said it the other day, they've got 10 guys by my count that have started games. Now, some of those were by absolute necessity thrown to the dogs in that bowl game in Music City 2 years ago. But you still Gabe Judy in there. That makes 11 guys that have started an SEC football game. So there's tons of options, and like you said, Eric, guys have played different spots. I think Warren Burrell playing inside and at Star is intriguing, but man, you got a lot of guys that have to prove it. Like AP said, contract years for a lot of guys in the secondary.
Willie Martinez's room is like Baskin Robbins. There's 31 different flavors. They just got to figure out to me it's what's steady. Like there might be a guy that flashes or two, but they need some consistency and some athleticism, and whoever can provide that combination is the guys I would roll with.
Yeah, steady makes me a little bit nervous because then that gets back into, well, he knows where to be all the time.
Well, I'm saying steady and be there. Combination of steady and that. Like Gabe Judy Lally is the guy that I think of like good athlete. Is he the best athlete in the secondary? Probably not, but good athlete, runs well, and has the mental part of it.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
Does that make sense? I totally understand how that came across.
Yeah, but
you got to be more athletic. Everyone knows where I stand on the back end of the defense. And
I'm with Hubbard. I know what you're saying, AP, but when I hear steady, I think of somebody steadily giving up an 8-yard cushion every snap.
Yeah.
Well, my thing is like Kamal Haddon's got a lot of athleticism, but then you went to that South Carolina game and he just chirp the whole time, and to me was a liability out there. Now he's had a good off season. We'll see if it translates. Again, when he flashes, Kamal Haddon, very, very capable. Then his down is don't really need him out there. He's a detriment.
How's his health, AP?
He should be fine.
Yeah, you're right. Kamal, to me, the South Carolina thing is not as bad, other than it was awful to chirp while you're getting beat. All 11 defenders were liabilities that night for Tennessee. They couldn't stop anybody anywhere. Now, the Miami or the Orange Bowl game, some of that chirping there, he got away with a couple things that, probably could have been flagged on him. He's got to be under control. He can't be a liability that way, 100%. Again, that's a guy that a lot of us didn't think would ultimately end up being in this program. But he was the best corner coming out of spring, and he's kind of still been there as one of the top corners. But the thing that you have for Kamal Haddon is there's somebody who can take Kamal Haddon's spot. Last year, there wasn't anybody to take Kamal Haddon's spot. Okay, yeah, you didn't like him running his mouth, but who are you going to play? right? You're beat up and banged up, but he was clearly your most athletic option before you put the Nico Slaughter in there in the Kentucky game. If he becomes any kind of early liability in a game, doesn't play well, there's about 3 or 4 guys you can plug and play in his spot, which I think is of great benefit for the corners and kind of keeping everybody under control emotionally, which was a hard thing to do for a couple guys last year.
Real quick, how are those young guys? 5 freshmen, 3 corners, 2 safeties. You know, when we're talking about this rotation, these guys pushing everything. I mean, we've seen some of these guys flash a little bit. What are we hearing about the freshman defensive backs?
Well, I mean, I think what Austin was saying earlier, I mean, the athletic ability is the first thing that jumps out. I mean, Ricky Gibson's a heck of an athlete. Jordan Matthews is a heck of an athlete. I think Christian Connors has closed this fall camp as well as any of those freshmen have at the corner position. So, I mean, I think when you start there, you feel really good about those guys. The blessing is that they're not handing them a starting uniform. You know, they're not giving them a uniform and say, hey, you're a starter, figure it out on Saturday, like they did Alante Taylor, who's a receiver that they flipped over there and said, figure it out. Bryce Thompson and some of these other guys. So, you know, the blessing is they can bring those guys along at a steady pace as opposed to just putting them out there and letting them sink or swim, basically what they did with some other guys.